Good morning again, everyone. It's kind of cool to see you all this morning. It's been encouraging, I got to tell you. I've really been uplifted in the past few weeks on just the turnout and the strength that we've really just been gaining here. And I hope this is encouraging to you as it is to me. You know, with the brotherly love that we're really just starting to bind and come together and just be that strong group that's just, wow. You know, when you see it kind of happen, you know, I'm a young guy, I always say, I'm 24 years old, and it's different for me. And I really do appreciate it, and I really do appreciate your encouragement. So I thank y'all for that. This morning, I'm gonna introduce something totally new. You've probably never seen this before. I want you to turn with me in your Bibles, in your Pew Bibles, to page 442, if you're using a Pew Bible. We're gonna look at 1 Samuel chapter 17. You probably have never heard this story before. It's about, I heard some chuckles already. It's about this really big guy named Goliath. Okay, he's like 9.5 foot tall, and this other kind of scrawny guy named David. We're going to talk this morning about the story of David and Goliath. And you know, some Bible stories are great and impactful, no matter how well you know them and how many times you hear them. You know, I sat down and I really wanted to incorporate some Old Testament this week because I know we've really been, the past couple weeks, we've really been diving into the New Testament, and we've really been looking at a lot of different passages, but I really wanted us to take something from this morning because I took a little something different. You know, so near the top of that list for me, those Old Testaments, is the day that David defeated Goliath. I know this story pretty well. Okay, I think it's one of the first things our young kids, you know, start learning in the back. We recognize this story, so I'm sure it's familiar to you too. But this morning, I want to take a couple minutes, and we're going to read it. And I'm not going to read it fully because I know it can get a little lengthy and I don't want to spend the remainder of our time, you know, kind of reading through this. So we're going to kind of use the Cliff Noted version of this. So this morning's title, this morning, of course, we're talking about David and Goliath. So we're going to look at these passages. So if you would, just kind of follow along with me in your Old Testaments. 1 Samuel chapter 17. We're going to look down at verses 3 through 4. It's kind of where we will pull up to the story. So the Philistines and their massive warrior stood against God's people here. Okay, this is kind of the intro to what we're talking about. The Philistines stood on the mountain on one side, and Israel stood on a mountain on the other side, with a valley between them. And a champion went out from the camp of the Philistines named Goliath from Gath, whose height was 6 cubits and a span. Okay, big guy. Really big guy. And so you can kind of imagine here you got two armies kind of standing off. They're looking, there's kind of a valley in between them, and they send out their biggest warrior they have, the Philistines do. Look down at verse 11 now. And again, we're just kind of using the Cliff Noted versions of this. Verse 11. When Saul and all Israel heard these words of the Philistine, they were dismayed and greatly afraid. The people and their king Saul was dismayed and greatly afraid. They saw this, they heard what was going on here, and they were like, oh boy, this is bad. This is really bad. Go down with me now. We're going to jump a little bit along, and we're going to go into verse 26. Look down with me at verse 26. And I would encourage you, if you haven't read this story, I don't know why you wouldn't have, and I would encourage you to definitely read it more in depth on your own time, but for the sake of time this morning. Verse 26. Then David spoke to them, so now we're introducing David. Then David spoke to the men who stood by him, saying, what shall be done for the man who kills this Philistine and takes away the reproach from Israel? For who is the uncircumcised Philistine that he should defy the armies of the living God? So, David comes in smelling like sheep, right? We know David was a young shepherd boy. I mean, he comes in, he's just a little guy, kind of, you know, and I would encourage you again, read it on your own time. He describes some attributes of David, not a real big guy, a little guy, young at the time. He was the youngest of his brothers, and shows up, and he makes a very powerful faith statement right there, doesn't he? There's a very powerful faith statement that was just made right there. Look down with me at verse 32. Then David said to Saul, "Let no man's heart fail because of him. Your servant will go and fight with this Philistine." So guess what? Not only does he go in making powerful faith statements, he says, look, I'm going to volunteer to fight on behalf of all of Israel. Wow. I mean, you're talking to a little shepherd boy, comes in and King Saul, mighty King Saul, I'm going to volunteer and I'm going to go fight on behalf of all of Israel. In verse 33, and Saul said to David, "You are not able to go against this Philistine to fight with him, for you are a youth, and he a man of war from his youth." Saul has not courage in himself and seeks to dishearten and deter David. Okay, he wants to turn David from doing this. So look down now, verse 37. Moreover, David said, "The Lord who delivered me from the paw of the lion and from the paw of the bear, he will deliver me from the hand of this Philistine." Now I gotta say, David's not exactly just a normal guy, because he has conquered already a lion and a bear, okay, for kind of coming in and messing with his flock. Okay, but we see David draws on the previous power of God, and he speaks in very great faith. You know, he speaks with a lot of faith, a lot of encouragement, and knows he has it. So now we're going to look at verse 40, and I'm going to kind of, at this point, we will read 40 through 52, okay? We're going to just go ahead and get through this, 40 through 52. Then he took his staff in his hand, and he chose from himself 5 smooth stones from the brook. And he put them in a shepherd's bag and a pouch which he had, and his sling was in his hand, and he drew near to the Philistine. So the Philistine came and began drawing near to David, and the man who bore the shield went before him, and when the Philistine looked about and saw David, he disdained him, for he was only a youth, ruddy and good looking. So the Philistine said to David, "I am a dog, and you come to me with sticks." And the Philistine cursed David by his gods, and the Philistine said to David, "Come to me, and I will give your flesh to the birds of the air and the beasts of the fields." Then David said to the Philistine, "You come to me with a sword, with a spear, and with a javelin, but I come to you in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you defied. This day the Lord will deliver you into my hand, and I will strike you and take your head from you. And this day I will give you the carcasses of the camp of the Philistines to the birds of the air and the wild beasts of the earth, and that all the earth may know that there is a God in Israel. Then all this assembly shall know that the Lord does not save with the sword and spear, for the battle is the Lord's, and he will give you into our hands." So it was, when the Philistines arose and came and drew near to meet David, that David hurried and ran towards the army to meet the Philistines. And David put his hand in his bag and took out a stone, and he slung it, and struck the Philistine in his forehead, so that the stone sank into his forehead, and he fell on his face to the earth. So David prevailed over the Philistine with a sling and a stone, and struck the Philistine and killed him. But there was no sword in the hand of David. Therefore David ran and stood over the Philistine, took his sword, drew it out of its sheath, and killed him, and cut off his head. And when the Philistines saw their champion was dead, they fled. Now the men of Israel and Judah arose and shouted, and pursued the Philistines as far as the entrance of the valley and to the gates of Ekron. And the wounded of the Philistines fell along the road to Shaaraim, even as far as Gath and Ekron. Wow. Wow. I know we went through that kind of fast, but without the slightest appearance of a warrior here, not armor or sword, he goes out. The adversary was vile and mean. This guy was bad. He was a bad dude. I mean, Goliath was a bad guy. He was pompous, and he thought he could not lose. And of course, fearlessly, David lauds the name of God and God's ability to deliver the people. And then it happened. You know, it actually happened with a single shot. The giant was killed, and David prevailed. Not Saul. David prevailed, not Israel. David by his faith in God. And this changed everything. It changed everything. The soldiers had a renewed courage and ran off the enemy. Wow. Wow. You know, I know a lot of preachers like to say this. Boy, that'll preach right there. That'll preach right there. You know, there's not much you got to do to that to turn it around and try to figure too much out. And it has been preached. Okay, this story has been preached many, many times. Okay, and let's be honest, have you ever heard a story? Or have you ever heard a sermon preached on David and Goliath? Probably. We all can probably raise our hands and say that we have. I have too. You know, and it's usually kind of preached something like this. I'll give you guys a little insight. I'm not gonna preach this sermon. This isn't exactly what I'm going for this morning. I'm not gonna preach this morning, but usually when it is preached, it goes a little something like this. Of course, you need a good title. I like this title, Conquering the Giant. Okay, I'm going to stick with that title. I think that's a good title. Conquering the Giant. And so, secondly, what else would you need? Well, you need to take a story and you need to put it into 4 somewhat memorable points, reflecting the incredible faith of David. Let me tell you, there's a lot we can take away from this story. I think we probably all kind of have through our childhood, and we use it so much. David was undeterred by fear in others. Boy, you know, he had every reason to be afraid. I mean, he came into a hopeless situation. The king was hopeless. King Saul was hopeless. And so he took that and he was undeterred by it. Wow. You know, and then David had faith rooted, I couldn't really think of a better word there, rooted in the power of God. You know, I think we saw that. He knew, look, hey, God's already delivered me from this lion. He's delivered me from the bear. I got this. I'm not even worried. You know, send me, little shepherd boy out there. I'll take care of it. And then David was not dismayed by the threats of an enemy. Let me tell you, this Goliath guy, I'm not kidding you, he was nothing like we would see. I mean, this dude was big. I mean, and bad. You know, I'm talking, this guy would kill you. You know, there wasn't much hope there. And he was hurling threats at him, was he not? I mean, he was just hurling threats like, look, am I a dog? You're a stick. I mean, this is not going to go well from you. I'm going to feast on this. You know, this is all but over. And then finally, of course, we see that David acted with courage, with full trust in the Lord. I think that's really fair to say. You know, we know he went out there, sling, stone, went out there. And let me tell you too, just so everybody knows, it mentions Goliath had a helmet on his head. So you got to imagine something. He knew he had to hurl that stone and hit, I don't know, whatever is left of the forehead exposed. I mean, and guess what? If he didn't do that, he had about T-10 seconds, I would say, before he wasn't around anymore. You know, so he knew he had a small place to put it, and boy, he acted with full trust in the Lord. And so, if I were preaching this lesson, we would highlight David's points, which we just did, and then comes the application portion of the lesson, right? This is where I tell you that, well, not here yet, but this is where I tell you that God's people, that you need to be like David. You know, all those David points, I would insert you into them. You know, you need to be like David. And this is where we note that the title is not about David and Goliath. It's about, you know, you and your big Goliath and your big enemies. And conquering the giant is just actually about you conquering the devil. Okay? And you need to be like David. You got to be like David. I would use that. And then, of course, I have to give you some New Testament application. So I would encourage you, I didn't mean to put all this up here, but we're going to encourage you to turn over to Romans chapter 8. And we'll look at verse 37. And boy, if I could just find a New Testament verse where it used the word conquering, because, you know, that's the title of my story, which is good news. Not to give it away, I found a New Testament verse for that. And look with me at Romans chapter 8 and verse 37. Yet, in all these things, we are more than conquerors through him who has loved us. Boy, we Okay? You know, I cannot let other people's fear affect me. Look, guys, I got news for you. We're not always going to be surrounded by faithful people. Did you know that? I mean, we most of the time, I would say, in our worldly jobs and things of that nature, are not surrounded by people like they, and by people with the same courage. And guess what? It's life. You will probably be in a situation very soon where you won't be surrounded by faith. You know, by people who are uplifting you. And I got news. Sometimes, and I hope that's not here, sometimes it can even be in the church. Sometimes it can even be in the church that you can find yourself in those situations. So we recognize, you know, we can't let other people's fear affect us. We gotta keep pushing through that. It's gotta be, you know, us who sees that different, and we push through that fear, and we just get to that next point. I tell you, you know, Olivia, and I didn't have this written down, but you know, Olivia, I love. She prays all the time. Okay, and I think she prays better than me. In my mind, sometimes I'm like, wow, she's really got it going on. I don't know. And you know, sometimes I think it's that lack of maybe fear in me, you know, that possibly protects us. I mean, who keeps me faithful is those prayers. You know, that strength from another person. So just wanted to throw that in and just to give to you. Secondly, I have to stay, and again, I'm not preaching this lesson, but I have to stay fueled by God's power. You know, David had 100 reasons to give up, like I said. He really did. He had no reason. But you know what? He kept pushing through it. And I tell you what, guys, sometimes we have 101 reasons to give up. But we gotta recognize what our goal is, what our end game is, who we have a relationship with. See, that's the thing. Who are you in a relationship with? Is it those people that I talked about at first, those unfaithful ones, or is it that relationship with God? Relationship with Christ, I should say, rather. So, moving along here, you know, this is just. I cannot listen to the enemy's lies. We talked about David. He wasn't deterred by the threats of Goliath. Well, now, guess what? This doesn't mean that the enemies are going to stop talking. The enemies will never cease to just try and just get to you. You know, and we got to just remain strong and keep pushing through that. So, finally here, I will be victorious if I trust in God. Notice I put I will. Not I should, I can be. I will be victorious if I trust in God. And I think that's a very powerful lesson. I mean, I think I've heard this lesson. I'm not saying that it's a bad lesson. I mean, I take a lot away from it. And so, there's nothing wrong with this sermon in terms of goals and who we want to be, okay? Who we desire to be. But, you know, I'm wondering if we missed the point of the original story here. You know, I tell you, I think we all have read this story many, many times. And I always take away some things like this that pull from it. You know, David's kind of my substance here, and I'm kind of the shadow that I could just kind of pull ideas from this and pull things away. But I got to tell you, if I know one thing above all else this morning, is this. I am no David. I'm no David. You know, I don't know. I have a strong suspicion that a few, if any, in the room today would have played that role. Now, I mean, I just want to be honest. You know, I'm not that person. You know, let's go back and look at this story again and see if we could have ever been like David. All right, look. Number one, you show up to the battle, a shepherd. Here again. And you've seen the power of God in your life before, so when you see a terrified army of brothers and a frightened king, I don't know who that king is, maybe it's yourself in your life. Maybe it's someone else, maybe it's yourself. And a frightened king and a formidable army across the hill and a 9.5-foot giant before them proclaim aloud, "No one defies the living God." I don't know if that was me. I tell you, I love getting up here and preaching. I do. But I like getting up here and preaching to a room of people who like listening to me. He was not in that situation at that time. You know, I wouldn't like getting up there and saying, "Let me tell you something, Saul. Guys, what's going on? No one defies the living God." I'm walking right into this camp and telling everybody around who's scared what's going on. I don't know if that's me. I mean, I'm just being completely honest. So, secondly, your brother, okay, tells you to leave, and the king assures you there is nothing that can be done, but you speak the name of the Lord and then proclaim that you will fight that enemy on behalf of the people. Think about that. I mean, really, you say, "You know what? Saul, older brother, in a matter of fact, I'm going to go fight this person myself. I'm going to go out there. There's a 9.5-foot giant. I know he's waiting across there. And guess what? I'm going to go get him." Let's be honest. I'm not David. You know, I'm no David when it comes to that. You know, who here would have been willing to do that? I mean, I think it's a fair question here. And then number 3, you can't fit into the armor. Okay, you can't fit in the armor here, so you can't wield a sword. Okay, you're just too scrawny, so you can't do it. So with no soldier's protection, in a sling with 5 stones, you walk out before your people and up to the giant, and you say, "God sent me here, and you are going to die." I don't know. You know, I don't know if that's me. I don't know if that was really me there. And then, number 4, we'll just kind of finish with this. The giant insults you and belittles you and stands before you fully convinced that he will win. And and you realize that this is the last second you've got to turn and run, but you don't. You got just 1 second left, and you don't turn and run. Instead, you hurl a stone at the giant, knowing if it doesn't navigate his guard and hit that spot on the forehead, you are done for. Me? No. That's not me. I mean, I'm just being completely honest. That's not me. You know, I don't know if I had that. So, let's get real. Okay? We're going to get real. Where are you and I in this story that's unfolding? I mean, you know, or maybe just me. Maybe you can say, "Hey, that was me all the way. I was David that day." You know, that was 100% me. Where were you and I when this story was all unfolding? We're the soldiers. We're the soldiers. You remember those soldiers? We are scared, and we're frightened, and we had no way out and no way forward. We were pretty hopeless, I would say. We didn't really have a lot of answers, and we were awaiting our death. And we needed someone to come and fight for us. That's me. I'm a paralyzed fighter. I'm a paralyzed soldier and praying for a deliverer. That was me. So, again, you know, I think, and I've read it a few times, and again, I'm not saying this. One thing I've always kind of realized is that usually the Old Testament are shadows to the substance of the New Testament. The substance of Jesus. What's the Bible about that? It's Jesus. You know, it's that there's that substance. There's what we're hoping for. There's what we're getting to. So no, the story of David and Goliath is not about my victory over the adversary. It's not about my victory over the adversary. It's about Christ's victory over Satan and the deliverance that brought for a frightened soldier like me. That was me. You know, I didn't step up like that. I couldn't have. Man, I can't go kill one thing and just save the whole nation of Judah. I mean, here we are. You know, that's not me. That's not who I was. If it's about us, it is like something amazing to something menial. But if it's messianic, David is a shadow, and Christ is the substance. You know, I think we have to kind of realize that. What do we know about Christ? He was undeterred by fears of others. Let me tell you, I wasn't that way. I wasn't that way. But he was. If you remember when he came onto the scene, surrounded by a lot of cowardness. I mean, he was surrounded by a lot of doubting. There was not a lot going good. And he stepped into that situation. You know, they were supposed to be fighters, but were losing the battle. Jesus was not deterred by this. He stepped in. He stepped up for me. There I am. The lonely fighter waiting. What happened? Of course, we know this. Jesus lived with an absolute conviction and the power of God to deliver sinners. He lived with that. I mean, we see that. I don't even have one example. I just have a whole gospel. 4 gospel books to talk about that. Jesus knew what God could do. He knew why he was sent. To win. He was sent to win. Me, you know, again, I can't be that one. Now, I can get through life, but I can't be that one that was sent to defeat that adversary. Jesus never gave in to any of the temptations or tactics of the devil. He never did. And you know, he was tempted. I think we all remember that. Jesus was tempted every life. And you know, sometimes I always wonder, why did the devil even try? You know, if you ever, like, come on now, it's Jesus. Why did the devil even try? Well, I gotta tell you, it's because he saw weakness there in that body. There was weakness in that body. You know, Jesus, he was wearing this. There was some form of like, wow, if now's my chance, or if I'm going to get him, here we go. This is my opportunity to do this. Nothing the devil could say would keep him from his victory. So, finally, here we are. He acted with courage, with full trust in the Lord. Jesus proclaimed victory over sin and even death by the will of the Father. You know, so he looked, remember like David? He looked nothing like a warrior. Nothing like a warrior. David came in, small, sheep-smelling, just a little guy, young. Jesus, nothing great appearance. He didn't come in wielding a sword. He didn't come in doing all this. He looked nothing like a warrior, and he was our only warrior. So, this story should absolutely fill us up with gratitude and love for our King, for Jesus Christ. You know, you might wonder then, are we in this story really at all, besides just kind of being a frightened little soldier? Like, is there anything about us on the journey to be seen in the day that David conquered Goliath? Where do I fit in here? I read it to you a little bit earlier. Look back with me at chapter 17. And look with me at verse 52. This is me. This is me right here. Now the men of Israel and Judah arose and shouted and pursued the Philistines as far as the entrance of the valley and to the gates of Ekron. And the wounded of the Philistines fell among the road and Sharon, even as far as God and Ekron. That was me right there. After that conqueror came through, I couldn't do it on myself. Guys, I struggled. Man, I didn't have that in me. But let me tell you, I do now. I do now. Do you see that? I have that faith now. You know, something changed, didn't it? Something changed in this. They were no longer afraid. They stepped out. They stepped forward. They believed. They chased away the enemy. Why? Well, because they found courage in David. They found courage in David. And guess what? Where are you? Who are you? I mean, we face that giant all the time. Now, the thing is that we couldn't defeat that. But we can pursue. We can pursue because why? Death was already defeated. It's been done. We don't have to sit there and do all that. We had the warrior who had the courage, who stepped up, who made that happen. Now we're those soldiers, man. We're pursuing. We're those frightened people that just, you know what? Before this guy came, we were hopeless. Hopeless. But now I got it. I can figure it out. You know, we too should find the courage behind Jesus Christ. He defeated the enemy when you could not. You know, Satan with his sin in one hand and death in another, he slew him. Jesus won. He won. Congratulations. See, this should be an encouraging time. Because we don't have to stand there hopeless anymore. Now we can come out of our hiding place. And we can see the devil's work today as entirely weak, unbeatable by Christ's power. Because it's already been done. It's already been done. So turn back with me. By the way, I don't know, I didn't give you the full context here in Romans chapter 8. Because Romans chapter 8, this is really what it's all about. Okay? Look with me at Romans chapter 8 and move back at verse 37. Romans 8 verse 37. Yet in all these things we are more than conquerors through what? Through Him who loved us. Through Him who loved us. We do conquer. You're right. Victory is ours. The enemy cannot resist us. Again, through Him. You can't do it by yourself. Trust me. I think we've all been there and kind of tried. You can't do it by yourself. And we don't have to anymore. We already have that victory. Look at me now at look a little further. I'm going to read 38 through 39. For I am persuaded that neither death, nor life, nor angels, nor principalities, nor powers, nor things present, nor things to come, nor height, nor depth, nor any other created thing shall be able to separate us from the love of God, which is in Christ Jesus our Lord. His love, His leadership, His majesty. Nothing can defeat us because nothing can defeat Him. The question is, do you believe that? You know, do you believe that? That's kind of our issue there. Is that sometimes we don't quite make that commitment. We don't quite make that true full belief. Look at Romans, turn back just a couple chapters earlier, Romans 6, 5 through 7. How are we freed? How are we freed from sin? Romans 6, 5 through 7. For if we have been united together in the likeness of His death, certainly we also shall be in the likeness of His resurrection. Knowing this, that our old man was crucified with Him, that the body of sin might be done away with, that we should no longer be slaves of sin. Free from sin through baptism. Because we unite ourselves with Him. That's who we are, guys. You know, again, I know David. I couldn't have done that. But I can be those people. That, you remember what they were saying? Guess what? After that happened, David killed his thousands and tens of thousands. Just like we should be, you know, how we chant that. You know, we have a conqueror. We have that. Go back to chapter 8. We'll look at just a couple more verses. Chapter 8, 13. For if you live according to the flesh, you will die. But if by the Spirit you put to death the deeds of the body, you will live. Every day fight this battle. You know, not because you have the courage of David, but because he did. That's the foreshadow. This is the shadow to the suffering that we have. And then finally, 10 through 11, in the same chapter 8. And if Christ is in you, the body is dead because of sin, but the Spirit is life because of righteousness. But if the Spirit of Him who raised Jesus from the dead dwells in you, He who raised Christ from the dead will also give you life to your mortal bodies through His Spirit who dwells in you. Folks, let me tell you. You know, why do we fight? Why do we do all this? Because we have faith in Jesus. Now let me explain something though. You don't get to just have this faith and it's just, oh well, you know, Jesus went, He conquered it for me, so I don't have to do anything. You know, it's kind of that real big idea that kind of circulates out there. Jesus got me. I'm cool. You know, I can live my life how I want to do. No, what did those soldiers do in verse 52? You had to pursue it. They didn't just kick back and say, whoa, David got us, man. Thank goodness for David. We're going to go home and do what we want to do. No. See, the thing is, you can't use it as a crutch. Now, you have it as a crutch, but you have to put it on, don't you? You have to go down in that water and go to baptism. That is the way you have to do it. To go down and you come up new. You truly, truly do. You come up new, you come up pure, you come up spotless. White as snow. But now, the thing about that is though, how do you continue on too? Do you pursue? You got to conquer. Congratulations. I mean, and I hope, again, I still use these same 4 points. You mustn't let people affect their people's fear affect you and so forth. I think those are very powerful things to take away. I think those are shadows and somewhat of what we're taking away from here. And I hope that encourages you. You know, I'm not throwing out any sermons about this, the other sermons about David and Goliath. You know, because those are important things too. But I think what we have to realize is we have that conqueror. You didn't have to do that part. You know, we had that fearless who came in, put it to death. Sin, we're good. It's been conquered. Death has been conquered. But what do we do with it? What are you doing with it? Every day is a fight. And guess what? I'm scared. You're scared. We didn't have much before this happened. Now we have it all. If we continue to go for it. So, this morning, if you've been struggling with your fight, you know, if you find yourself weak in times and just really need prayers in the congregation, we all have been there. I promise. I've been there. You know, just where that faith isn't as strong, and I was letting some stuff I didn't pursue like I should have been pursuing. I kind of fell back. Or if you haven't gone down to that water of baptism and come up anew and put on Christ and made that choice, it's essential. It is essential. I would ask you to come forward as we stand.